Hello. So now we're going to go over the final block piles that we have to go over for the museum in Block Hunt, right? And that is the left side of the map, right? And that is basically this vertical strip, right? If you recall, 2 videos ago, we went over the right vertical strip over there, right? We went over the vertical strip right here, right? This one right here. Now we're basically going over the one that is on the opposite side, right? The left side of the map, right? Now, keep in mind, the left side of the map is really uncommon to find hiders hiding, right? It's really uncommon. You typically don't see it happen. And so, really, how do we approach it is the question you might be wondering. Well, the way we approach it is you can basically, there are many different routes, but we're going to start from the opposite end, actually. Right, we're actually going to start over here. Right, we're going to start over here. Basically, as for the block piles, right, we're basically talking about this entire left outline. You don't really have to worry about these block piles so much. Right? Once you become a radar hunter, you'll easily be able to determine if there's a fake one here. And, I mean, you could potentially see them at the beginning of the game, right? You could potentially see hiders hide over there, but typically, if you do see that, you'll kill them. That's why it's really uncommon to find hiders hiding over here as blocks in the beginning of the game, because usually you see them, right? So basically, you just radar over here, right? Notice how a nice pattern over here with the note blocks is that it goes 1 3 1 3 1 3, but not really that important if you can just radar it really easily, and you can easily see it from hiders or from hunter spawn. So I'm not going to worry about this melon stack or any of the block piles over here for that matter. Right, but what we are going to look at is we're going to look at basically everything over here, right? Everything along this vertical strip, right? And we're going to look at everything in this room and the room in that back left corner over there. So starting with flower pots, right? Basically, it's just a total of 5 flower pots. I'm not going to go over many of the notable spots you might see, right? I'm going to be a little bit more general about this because they're not super common, right? Basically, 5 flower pots. Over here with the melons, notice how there actually is a notable spot though, right? You can find a melon hiding behind the stack like this. But really, it's not that big of a deal because notice how you have this common structure that's been occurring in many of the block piles we've looked at so far, right? Notice it's that same exact structure if you focus on those piles. So it makes it really easy to determine if there's a fake one here or not. So like for instance, if the stack is disrupted like 2 in a row, 2 on top of each other, or way too high up, right? Just like that. I guess if you ever see 2 melons in a row like that, you should be able to identify something like this as fake as well. You might even see flower pots hide behind this thing, so that's why I'm saying it's a notable spot. Again, for these flower pots, there's a total of 5 of them, just like how there's 5 flower pots over here. So again, it's a nice pattern that you can kind of pick up on, right? 5 and 5, right? For the TNTs, basically, again, you have that same common structure, right? Just like for the melons over here, right? Melons have that same structure. TNTs also have that same exact structure. So again, do you see that's disrupted, like 2 in a row, 2 on top of each other, or maybe a square TNT, one that goes way too high up. Something like that has to be fake, just like that. Over here, you don't have that structure though. Basically, as you enter this a lot and a lot, you're going to eventually just realize whether or not there's a fake TNT here, right? 2 on top of each other. Basically 2, 2, 3. Really easy to memorize. Just 2, 2, 3. You have a TNT right here or right here is typically what you see. Right? Something like that can be fake. Right? You shouldn't see that common structure over here though. Like for instance, if there is a TNT here, right, this common structure doesn't occur here. So that would be fake. Now, we're not going to go inside this room yet, right? We're going to continue going along this path. Because again, we have actually, literally, when we look at the furnaces, we see that same exact structure occurring again. The same exact thing is occurring, right? The same exact thing that we saw actually in the melon stack. Notice how it's actually identical, right? Neglecting this melon, right? These melons and that melon right there is identical. Right? It's identical to what we see in the furnace stack right here, right? We have this same structure in that furnace right here. Same thing we saw in the melon stack. Notice how all these furnaces are. Basically, you just have a staircase of two furnaces in both of them, right? It's two furnaces, right? Staircase of two furnaces here and here. So it makes it really easy. If you see it squared off like this, or like this, it's fake. Now, the furnaces aren't even facing the same direction over here, so it's also not going to be super bad, right? Assuming they don't orient themselves correctly, right? 2 in a row furnaces is fake. You should also never see a staircase of 3 furnaces, right? That would also be fake. But I'd say the most common thing to know about is if you see a furnace, like a furnace behind the stack like that. So something like that would be fake. Also, you should never, again, see this stack disrupted like that. So. Alright, so after the furnaces, right, we keep heading in this direction, right? Guess we have some chickens over here. I don't really know about these. I guess I sort of know about them, but like there's only 2 of them over here, I guess. Well, for these hay bales, the hay bales are actually really similar looking to the furnaces. When it comes to the left side of it, right, we have a staircase of 2 furnaces, staircase of 2 furnaces. That same exact thing occurs in the hay bale stack, right? You have a staircase of 2 hay bales, staircase of 2 hay bales. So again, it's that same exact thing, right? You see a square of hay bales, it's fake, right? Really easy. But another thing is over here we have these hay bales, which are a little bit more complicated, right? But notice how there's this interesting spot where hydras can hide at, which is all the way in this hole right here, right? Sort of a weird spot, but a hydra can actually go all the way in there. Again, if you see a square of hay bales like this, for some reason becoming invisible. Or if you see a hay bale that goes way too high up like this. And that's basically the whole idea of that. Right, I won't really worry about any of the other spots over there. And I'll go over to here, which is these furnaces and some other stuff over here at this corner. As for the furnaces, notice how there's a hole right here a furnace can hide in. Right, so a hole, that's probably the most common thing to see. Right, the other thing you might see is a furnace physically inside this tunnel right here. Right, notice how this is actually a tunnel, right? A tunnel that hydras can go in. For some reason, right, it's this tunnel, right? You can basically go inside it. So that's basically this tunnel. Yeah, there's not really any other spot here that you really have to worry about so much. As for the note blocks and the bookshelves, basically, notice how they all have flower pots, right? 4 with the note blocks, 3 with the bookshelves. You don't really have to worry about the flower pots any further than that, because we know that there's 4 with the... I meant jukeboxes, right? There's 4 with the jukeboxes, 3 with the bookshelves, right? And as for just knowing what these look like, it's not super important. Eventually, you might be able to just pick up on fake hiding spots like this. Right? Really, the height of these bookshelves should go 2, 3, 4, 3. Should not go 3, 3, 4, 3. Right? So something like that can be obviously fake, if you've played long enough to sort of realize that. But I would just rely on Radar Hunter for this. As for the bookshelves, basically if you see something like a square of bookshelves again, or 3 bookshelves on top of each other like that. Basically just stuff like that. I'll pay attention for. That's basically it for this corner over here. Right. So we talked about everything along the border. But notice we have these pillars again, right? We have anvils, cauldrons, and we have anvils again. Right? We have these same pillars. And these pillars are also not really common to find hiders hiding. Right? Notice how most of the anvils are in fact, actually, doesn't really matter. Again, I would rely on the anvils for Radar Hunter. I can't really identify any clear patterns with them. Unless you want to memorize them by the numbers, which is sort of useless, so I wouldn't really worry about it too much. But notice, right, if you recall from what we did when we went over the previous vertical strip, right, the right vertical strip, right, almost all the pillars were anvils, right? The only pillar that didn't have anvils was this one, right? It had cauldrons instead. We also have a pillar on the left side that has cauldrons, right? We have, right, it's right here, right? But we also have a few more stuff, right? Over here we have note blocks with this pillar, and we have flower pots over here with this pillar. Right? Let's quickly go over the cauldrons first, and then we'll talk about the others. Right? If we recall, the patterns that we saw in the previous one, right? Basically, there were 3 notable spots, right? Right? If you see a cauldron at this corner, it's fake. Right? Or if you see a cauldron at the other corner over here, it's fake. Right? Or if you see 2 in a row. That's what we saw with the previous cauldron. Right? What we saw with this one. As for this cauldron stack, as for the corners of the stack, turns out, yes, you could find a cauldron hiding at this corner. That's perfectly possible. But it's not possible to find one at the other corner because there's already one there. So really, we don't even have to worry about it, right? We only have to worry about this specific corner if we want to look for a fake cauldron. Right, another thing, notice how we basically have a diagonal line of cauldrons right here. So if you see it squared off, for instance, like this, or like this, then that would be fake. Right, or if you see 2 cauldrons in a row, specifically right here, that's also fake. And that's basically it for the cauldrons. Right, of course, flower pots will be hiding inside of them. Going to the next one, we have note blocks. Note blocks, they're not similar looking to the note blocks we went over here, right? If you recall, the note blocks we went over here were these ones. They're not really that similar to it. The pattern that we notice here is that we look at lots of L shapes, right? We have an L shape right here, right? This is the big L, right? And this is the little L. That's what you can really pick up on. Right? If you see that L structure disturbed like this, as you see, the L structure goes away if there's a note block right here. And that would be fake. Right, if you see 3 note blocks in a row like this, which I don't usually see, square of note blocks, see a note block on top like this, stuff like that, basically fake. And the flower pots are really easy, it's just a total of 3 flower pots that you just have to know. It's actually not that bad. Right, and that's basically it for this part of the left side of the map. So far, we've talked about this entire left vertical strip, but we still have to talk about the actual left side of the map, which is the contents of this room and this room. Now, there are a lot of block piles in here, right? There's a lot, but it turns out, right, they're uncommon, right? For the most part, they're uncommon, so we don't have to worry about them so much, right? It's mainly radar that's going to pick up these spots, right? We're going to start from over here, right, from this side. Right, go over basically starting with this furnace stack. Well, the furnace stack really isn't that important. Right? You don't have to worry about it so much. Right, basically 1, 3, 2 if you want to memorize it that way. Right? If you really want to, but again, it's not that important. I guess if you have one that goes, oh my goodness, this happened last time. Right, if you have a furnace right here like this, it's fake. Right, I guess if you have one behind this tree as well. It's usually going to be a flower pot behind the tree if you do see one behind here. Right. Now notice how we have sort of, this is our tiny dinosaur, right? This is our small one, right, on this rectangular platform. Again, we have anvils surrounding it, and notice how the only anvils that are going to be facing the same direction are in this alignment, right? The orientation usually doesn't happen, but if it does, basically, I guess you could memorize it by the numbers. That's probably what I would do. But I don't really know the vertical ones that much. Right? There's 4 on this side and 5 on the other side, right? But as for this vertical strip, basically it goes 2, 3, 2, right? You should never see 3 in a row right here. Right? That would be fake. You should never see 4 in a row like this. You should also never see 3 in a row, right? That's basically it. There's also a total of 4 flower pots here, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should be a total of 4. You should never see like a flower pot in here. Right, so if you see something like this, as you can see, they feel a little bit more hidden, right? So you can kind of see why they would hide there. So it's important to keep track of spots like those. Right? There's stuff like that. It's important to be aware of. I guess they can get on top of the dinosaur, but I guess it's pretty obvious that there's a fake one there. Right. They can also get on top of this, I think it's I don't even know what it's called. they can get, I'm pretty sure they can get on top of this. I thought they could. Yeah, they can, right? As you can see, they can get on top of this thing, and as you can see, they can become solid here. And I mean, as you enter the room from over here, you can't even see, you can't even tell whether or not there's a block over here. So it makes it really difficult to really notice that. You just enter the room without checking over here. So it's definitely important to keep track when you're radaring, to at least, you know, radar a little bit over here as you're radaring. So it's important to keep track of that spot. As for the anvils, there's 3 anvils on this side, 3 anvils on this side, so not super bad. You could also find blocks like literally within the corner, right, like over here. That's perfectly fine too. Right, next, let's go over these block piles, right, the bookshelves and the hay bales. As for the bookshelves, really notice how there's two, the 2-block staircase, right? There's a 2-block staircase here and a 2-block staircase here, right? And then you can just fill in the gaps for the rest, right? So again, if you see a square of hay bales like this, or a square of hay bales like this, it's fake. There's something like that. I've also seen this spot used as well. So you see something like that, right? A square of hay bales on top of the stack, or a square or a bookshelf that goes way too high up, right? So something like that would be fake. As for the hay bales, right? Notice how you have a staircase of 2 blocks and a staircase of 3 blocks, right? That's the notable structure, right? You shouldn't see a hay bale right here. And you should also never see 2 hay bales in a row like this or like this, right? That would be fake. Right, so something like that. As for the melons, right? Basically, I don't really know how to explain this. I guess if you see a square of melons like that, or 2 melons in a row, like that. You shouldn't see any melon blocking the area either, like this. That shouldn't happen either. But that's basically it for this. Right, last stuff in this room is basically everything along the border over here. The jukeboxes have a lot going on with it, so I really don't worry about them that much. You could break it up into parts if you really want to. Like, for instance, notice how you have that same common structure right here. Right over here you have 4, or actually the way you can think about it is you have 4 jukeboxes on top of each other, 4 jukeboxes on top of each other, and the rest are just little L's, right? You have a little L, little L, little L, little L, and of course a lone jukebox here. So that's one way that you could break it up into parts. But I don't really worry about it too much. The anvils, again, they aren't even facing the same direction over here, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I like saying that. I wouldn't worry about it too much. As for these anvils, notice how basically there's 1, 2, 2, and 3, right? So something like that is basically all you gotta look for. So you don't really have to worry about the anvils too much, in my opinion. Right, so the anvils you don't really have to worry about too much. The cauldrons, this is like the last thing we have to go over in this room, right? As for the cauldrons, right, notice how there's 2 gaps in the block pile, right? There's a gap right here, and there's a gap right here, right? Those 2 gaps should exist. And so something like that. And of course you can see hiders inside the cauldrons, right? Again, radar can take care of the rest. Right, over here, right, I'd say it's important to know whether or not, like, there's a bookshelf right here, so something like that would be fake. Or if you see a flower pot there, it's also fake, right, something like that. Right, or a flower pot inside this cauldron, I've seen that. Right, see something like that's fake. There is another little tunnel over here, but I'd say it's a lot less common to find hiders here than it is to find them here, just from what I've seen. Right. Now, we approach this room, which has a lot of block piles in it. There's a lot going on. How can we break this room up? Well, the most important spot in this room, there's really 2 important spots. Right, the first spot is over here, right, on top of these leaves. Sort of what we saw in those 2 tunnels, right? You can see hiders on top of these leaves, right? Flower pots, or literally any sort of blocks. Right, another thing is that the animal in this room is pigs. Right, sometimes you'll see hiders hiding as pigs in here, so. Right, if I hide as a pig, right? You'll see them hiding in here. So, now we're going to talk about the block piles. Actually, no, we have one more. Right, this is another common spot. Right, the first one was up on the leaves, but the second one is actually over here. Right, hiding in this sort of kitchen area. Right, as you can see, there's one gap in the overall block pile. So, I don't know why we come in furnace, but like if you see a hider right here, right, like could literally be anything, even like a cauldron. This would be fake, right? Anything that's in that specific spot. Another thing is that notice how there's one cake here. We haven't really talked much about cakes at all, right? I think we haven't even encountered any cakes on this map. As you can see, I think I think the only cakes in this map are on the left side of the map. So it's really interesting, right? Cakes in the museum are almost non-existent, right? The only place where they exist, I believe, is in this room. Right, literally, there's barely any. Right? It's literally all over here, and there should be a total of 2 cakes in this region. So, like for instance, if you see another one like this, like sort of like this, then that would be fake. Right, just like that. Right, just like that. I had to say that. I just needed to say that at least. Another thing you could see is you could see flower pots hiding on top of the tent. Right, something like that. Right. Notice how they can actually get up here as well, so it is also possible to find hiders all the way up here. And that's basically it for the common hiding spots in this room. As for thinking about this, the rest of the block piles in this room from a radar perspective, the first thing to notice is what we have on the outside of the map. I want you to notice that that common structure actually repeats itself many times. For instance, we see the common structure exists right here. Right, but if we actually keep going, right, it's not over here, but this sort of looks like the common structure. It's just this specific block is shifted one position to the right, right? But we still have that same common structure right here with this bookshelf pile, right? We have it right here with the note block pile, the hay bale pile, and that's basically it, right? But as you can see, it does exist. So it is important to realize that. So that's one way you can think about it. There's also a gap in this melon stack. So sometimes you'll see this gap filled like this. And again, if you see any modification to this common structure, then you know it's going to be fake. Over here, notice, I don't really know what to say about this stuff actually. Right, if you see 2 note blocks in a row, right, again, it affects that common structure. You know it's fake. Right, this cake is a real cake. Right, again, any modification to the structure, even if there's like a bookshelf or a note block right next to it, we know it's fake. As for the cauldron, right, if you ever see like a cauldron squaring off the stack, like if it's squared off like this, and on the other side, like right here, like 2 in a row like that, it's fake. Just something like that. Over here, again, if it's ever disrupted, like sometimes I'll literally see like the common structure disrupted. Right, notice how it is sort of disrupted with the note block stack, right? There is a note block right there, but again, if you see something like this, however, that would be fake. Right, so stuff like that. Right, these flower pots I wouldn't really worry about too much. And the rest of the center of the map, not center map, the rest of the central part of this room isn't really that important. So you don't really have to memorize it. Right, notice how there are quite a few gaps. So if you see like 3 in a row like this, or like 4 in a row like this, right, something like that, you can look for patterns like that. But that's basically it for this room and the left side of the map. Right, so overall, it's basically something you'll obviously radar. Right, it's the least common hiding spots to find hiders in the museum. I guess also, you can get on top of these leaves, right? So it is possible to find hiders on top of these leaves, which I should have mentioned before. That's basically it for